Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. Is it weird yet that the SEC v. Ripple lawsuit hasn't been ruled on yet by Judge Torres? Well, Attorney John Deaton shared some comments today, and he stated that if we don't have a conclusion soon, that Judge Torres is going to end up on the naughty judge list, which, by the way, is a real thing. It's not technically called the naughty judge list. That's what Attorney Deaton called it. But it is real. It does exist. And if we don't get a conclusion in this damn case sooner than later, Attorney Deaton pointed out, that's going to happen. Which is fascinating because Judge Torres has never, in her entire career, ever put herself in a position where she would be on that list. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. Oh, and towards the later part of the video, I'm going to cover the article that's on your screen here from The Block. Basically, it's talking about how former SEC Chair Jay Clayton thinks that, yeah, at this point, probably makes sense to approve a spot Bitcoin ETF after, under his rule, for years, he slapped them all down. Because reasons, folks. Because reasons. So here's what Attorney Deaton had to say here. And look, and by the way, I'll just preface this by just noting, I understand the frustration out there. I get it. I actually don't, I'm ready for the case to be over just like everybody else. I don't feel frustration, certainly not at the moment. I understand that these things take a long time. This is a monumental case here. But to anybody that is feeling frustrated and just wants this thing over, I can understand. But if you think that there's something weird going on here, or there's some sort of somebody pulling the strings, telling Judge Torres to do various things, this or that, I think we're getting a little bit too far in the Looney Tunes land. No offense. But you're starting to talk about some serious conspiracy theory stuff at that point. And so Attorney Deaton here, you'll see as I go through this, points out other cases that Judge Torres is ruling on, how long they've taken. And don't forget, she actually has, if memory serves, something like over 500 cases that she has to rule on right now. 500 active cases, and everybody, with these separate cases, they're all non, as far as I understand anyway, the rest of them, none of them have anything to do with crypto. But the point is, everybody there wants the case over just like we want this over because this is the one that's most relevant to us. But here's what Deaton said. So many people claiming something is strange because the Ripple decision is allegedly taking unusually long. Here are some facts to consider before putting your tinfoil hat on, jumping to conclusions. The Ripple and SEC reply briefs were filed in December. Thus, Judge Torres's decision is now at 7 months. Ripple isn't the only one waiting, however. In the Thor Equities case, also before Judge Torres, the reply briefs were also filed in December. Judge Torres hasn't ruled yet. Okay, so let me ask you, if you think that there's something funny going on here in the SEC v. Ripple case, does that mean that in this other case, which I'm not familiar with, it doesn't matter though, the Thor Equities case, same time frame here with Judge Torres, does that mean that there's some conspiracy going on in that case too? So the judge has 500 cases, and there are multiple cases right now where she's just doing illegal nonsense and having people rule over her. I refuse to believe that. It's just the way that I'm wired. I'm more skeptical than that. Like, to jump to these wild conclusions without any evidence, it's just, that is not how I roll. But anyway, Attorney Deaton continues. In the New York District Carpenters Fund case, Judge Torres' summary judgment ruling took over 8 months from the reply briefs. Quiller, Inc. versus USA took 7 months for Judge Torres' decision. The Fitzgerald case, and several others I could name, took 6 months for Judge Torres to rule on. In short, although I and others believe that we would see a ruling before now, there are other cases and examples that have taken an equal amount of time. Judge Torres is likely aware of the magnitude of her decision. Yeah, and I said this before, it's worth repeating. With the amount of documents that were filed in this case, certainly way more than the typical case that she's going to be handling here, and just understanding the magnitude of her decision ultimately, in hindsight, I think we probably just shouldn't be surprised that it's taking as long as it is. It's a sign she's taking this very seriously, I would think. David Schwartz responded to Attorney Deaton, and David Schwartz said, I know waiting is annoying, and we'd all love to have a ruling on summary judgment motions as soon as possible, but I wouldn't think anything was wrong, unusual, or strange until at least the end of September. And Attorney Deaton had something to say about the end of September. And by the way, I'll note here, he used the date in this tweet I'm about to read to you of September 31st. That does not exist. He just made a little accent. The last day of September is actually the 30th, but I'll just read it as is, and now you know. Attorney Deaton responded to Schwartz and said, I agree. On September 31st, Judge Torres would be placed on the 6-month naughty judge list for the first time, and her decision would be pending over 9 months. I didn't review every case she has had, but I didn't find any that were longer than 9 months, although one was slightly longer than 8 months. And so there you go. Very clearly, even though I understand everybody wants this thing over, I'd like to be over too, there's nothing funny going on here. There's nothing that strange going on. So even if most of our cases, if you just look at the average time it takes, would have ended by now, this still, we are not in uncharted territory. We just flatly are not. Attorney James K. Filan responded to Attorney Deaton, and he said, and he's just joking here, obviously, but he wrote, I'm not positive, John, but I think you're the only one who predicted it would be over by now. And he's got a little laughy face, because he actually, last year, I think it was in November, put out a tweet anticipating that we would have had a ruling, I think he said by the end of March, I want to say. And obviously, that's coming back. And I don't mind, look, I have no qualms with, attorneys here making educated guesses about when this might end. That's perfectly reasonable. And if the date that they're suspecting might come, for the ending might come, whatever it is, whatever the time frame is, and then it passes and it doesn't come, fine, whatever. It's not a big deal. And then Attorney Rispoli put out a tweet where, in part, he wrote, Judge Torres' statistics indicate a ruling is 60% likely by August 10th. So take that for what it's worth. I mean, it's coming. I gotta admit, I would be surprised if we don't see this thing all wrapped up, at least in terms of ruling on the motions for summary judgment, by the end of September. That would blow my simple little mind. And maybe it does happen. Maybe for the first time, Judge Torres goes on the naughty judge list. If so, okay, that's life. Then there was this from Bitcoin Magazine. They tweeted this out just this afternoon. They wrote, just in, Grayscale sends letter to judge protesting, how can a leveraged 2x Bitcoin ETF be approved by the SEC, but not a spot Bitcoin ETF? Yeah, and I think this is pretty wild. And I talked about this when this happened. I can't remember exactly when it was because the days blur together. All of them, they all blur together. But it's weird because, mind you, the SEC for a decade now, just over a decade, in fact, has been swatting down every spot Bitcoin ETF that has been proposed by any entity. But they proposed this thing, which, the 2x Bitcoin ETF leveraged here, that's risky. And they thought that that's something that market participants should have access to, but not an actual spot Bitcoin ETF. That seems peculiar. And so Attorney Deaton retweeted that, and he said, I was wondering whether Grayscale was going to do this. The SEC and Gary Gensler have approved a Bitcoin futures ETF, a Bitcoin short ETF, and a Bitcoin leveraged ETF, but denies a Bitcoin spot ETF because it can be manipulated. Gensler is a bad faith regulator. Period. Spot on, Attorney Deaton. And how about this bad faith regulator on your screen right here? Jay Clayton. Ooh, Jay Clayton. This guy, what a piece of work here. So for years, he was also swatting down every spot Bitcoin ETF that came his way. And now that he's no longer running the SEC, he seems to think that the SEC probably just should approve this. And so Attorney Deaton said on this, and I'll give you the specifics in a second, but Attorney Deaton said, sorry, but Jay Clayton deserves significant blame for the lack of regulatory clarity existing in the United States today. Hard stop. Spot on. And so here's the headline from The Block. Former SEC chair says Bitcoin ETF approval hard to resist if efficacy proven. Former U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Chair Jay Clayton said that applicants for a spot Bitcoin exchange-traded fund have a strong chance at approval if they can prove that it's a more efficient and effective way for investors to buy into the digital asset. Quote, and this is from today. He said, quote, if they're right that the spot market has similar efficacy to the futures market, it would be hard to resist approving a Bitcoin ETF, end quote. Now, folks, look, the argument about it's not safe for investors and there's room for manipulation, it's always been a bogus argument. What the hell's different now? What the hell's different now than when Jay Clayton was in charge? This doesn't make any damn sense. It's just bogus nonsense because they've been anti-crypto. Piece continues. But Clayton, who led the SEC during several rejections of previous Bitcoin spot ETF applications, and now works in private practice as a senior policy advisor at the international law firm Sullivan and Cromwell, demurred on making a prediction as to when a spot Bitcoin ETF might finally happen. I'll go ahead and take a guess here. Not in terms of timeline, but well, technically, so once something's once one of these applications is filed, there actually is a deadline for the SEC, and there are things they can do to extend it. So it would be within whatever that is. But the prediction I will make is that it's going to be BlackRock. It's going to be BlackRock that gets approved first. And I could be wrong, but that's what I've been hearing is most likely through the grapevine for over a year at this point, and they actually did jump into the space, so we'll see what happens. All right, piece continues. The SEC has rejected applications in the past due to lack of transparency and concerns about how to protect investors from the unregulated spot market. Clayton explained further the SEC's thinking, comparing how it handled approval of futures ETFs in the past. Quote, when the SEC approved a futures-based ETF, they said, let's look at the futures market. We see the surveillance. We see the protections in that market for the investor that are sufficient, end quote. And so he said that in a televised interview, and then he said, quote, we don't see them in the spot market, so we're going to make that distinction, end quote. Yeah, they didn't under his rule, but he's noting here at this point it's going to be hard to resist ultimately. And that's why, look, I think the SEC also understands under Gary Gensler's rule, what's most likely, if they don't approve one anyway, Grayscale there's a high probability that they'd actually win in court. So just as a reminder here, Grayscale, they were denied a Bitcoin ETF on more than one occasion, but this most recent time, they ended up coming back, and it was last summer, and they ended up suing the SEC, so we're still waiting to see the outcome of that. But even if they don't approve a BlackRock ETF or anyone else's, I think the court, if it comes to it, will force this to occur. Because it should. It's just so disingenuous and nonsensical, but that's where we are. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.